Mike Willamy, Clerk of the Board. Email public comments. No one has submitted emails for today's meeting. The next item is education. Continuous Learning Plan update. On March 30th, 2020, the board approved the Wichita Public Schools waiver application packet, including its continuous learning plan for submission to the Kansas State Department of Education. The district has implemented the district-wide continuous learning plan to provide all students access to evidence-based resources, guidance, and feedback to instruction during the closing of schools. Today's presentation is an update on the continuous learning plan. This presentation is for the board's information.
Good afternoon, Dr. Irving.
Before Dr. Irving shares her final spring continuous learning report on this COVID shutdown period, I wanted to share some great academic news with you. It is my honor to tell you and to thank the board and to also thank Dr. Irving publicly for her hard work as she began the journey of being our Deputy Soup of Academics. She has seated around this table. The Wichita Public Schools has received full accreditation from the Kansas Board of Education for the next 5 years. Yay. So let's clap for that. There's a lot involved with the accreditation process. And districts don't receive fully accredited status unless you have a rigorous process and procedures in place that focus on the success of all students. And we will plan to share more with you at a future meeting about the accreditation, but I thought it would be fitting to share this significant celebration with you all prior to our continuous learning report today. We look forward to sharing some of the things that we've learned, things that we need to continue to do, that we've done well, and then there are, of course, some things also as we continue to move forward that we will be taking a look at and improving on our processes and our outcomes. So we look forward to that report coming. But at this time, I'd like for us to give all of the teachers, all the principals, Dr. Irving and her team, and all of our operations folks that are sitting out in the audience, I'd like for us to give the district employees a round of applause for achieving such an amazing distinction of being fully accredited. So let's give ourselves a hand. Dr. Irving, I would turn it over to you.
All right. Well, I'm Tiffany Irving, Deputy Superintendent, and thank you, Dr. Thompson, for sharing that, because that journey to become fully accredited has been a full district-wide team effort from every staff member on our academic as well as operational staff. And I will say that our future-ready strategic plan really helped us be able to put the processes and procedures and structures in place to be able to present that to the Kansas Department of Education and the Kansas Board of Education. And so because of that, we have received that accreditation. So work is not ended. It just means that we are accredited now for 5 years, and we will build upon the positive and the strengths of our current plan and look to put in structures, procedures, and processes to continue to grow in those areas where we are not yet where we should be. So thank you for your support. So that does bring us to today, our continuous learning plan final update. This presentation will provide you with information to wrap up what has been happening since March, and it's been quite a journey. During this journey, we have been transparent in sharing that we will come before you to share data related to this continuous learning plan. And we are very pleased to be able to share that report with you about what has been occurring, those data indicators that speak to the work of the state's largest school district. And so what we will do today is just that. We're going to focus on our students, our staff, and families, and what we have learned during this process. So we actually ended up collecting student contact data in 2 different ways. Our first protocol did provide us lots of data that we have found to be extremely helpful but it did not give us the individual student contact information, which we also deemed to be important. We received many questions around how many students that we were not able to reach, and so we asked our teachers and our school leaders to go back to help us capture this data, and we are able to present that answer to that question in our report today. So this particular slide reflects the types of data that was included in our initial collection. Teachers reported how two-way communication was happening and what the learning preferences were as expressed by our families. Generally, about 2/3 of the contact happened via email or other electronic means, and 1/3 occurred by phone. In addition to email, contacts occurred through platforms like Microsoft Teams and Google Classrooms and other social media platforms. Teachers use multiple measures to connect with our students and to try to reach the unreachable. And there were many things that schools were doing to try to really find those students that they had not been able to connect with. We certainly saw grade level differences when teachers reported the learning preferences. About 2/3 of our elementary and middle school teachers reported that student preference for learning was paper packets, and 1/3 wanted to use online resources. At the high school level, nearly 90% of teachers reported that students preferred online learning compared to paper packets, whereas elementary and middle preferred the packets. So what does this tell us? We learned a lot about student learning preferences and best means of contacting our students, and we recognized that some students were difficult to reach. But we also learned that this method of collecting data did not give us the student individual data, and so we needed to find other ways to collect that. Individual student data was important, so we created another protocol for assessing our student contact for the purpose of understanding district-wide how many students we had not been able to reach. So what we did is we asked our teachers to tell us which individual students they had been in contact with throughout the spring. And I jumped ahead, I think, on my slide. This slide represents contact data between our teachers and our students.
Pardon me. We're getting some feedback on the remote contacts with Ernestine and Julie. Could you make sure, Ernestine and Julie, that you have your telephones and your muted and also your TV? Thank you. I'm sorry, Tiffany.
No problem. So this slide represents contact data between teachers and students. Using our student information system, we asked our teachers during that last week of school to go in and mark absence for any student that they had not had contact with, that they were unable to reach. And this contact wasn't just sending an email. We wanted our teachers to mark absence if we had not been able to have interactive communication with our students. Simply sending an email with no response did not constitute what we wanted to know. We wanted to know which students specifically we were unable to engage in our continuous learning process. And so this data is used to be able to help us plan for the future, plan for the fall on those students that we need to be very strategic on how we re-engage, help us plan what instructional needs that all of our students will have when we return to school in August. And so, a few of our findings. One reflects that Us prioritizing our work around high school seniors to support their credit completion was necessary for graduation, and that's reflected in our contact there. 2, reflecting on the lower percentage of 9th and 10th graders highlights the work that we're going to have before us this fall in order to re-engage these students. We know that 9th and 10th graders are the points that we must connect with and support, because too often these are students that are in jeopardy of dropping out. Our students are going to need our support this fall, not only in our classrooms, but outside of school. 3, we took away that social economics makes a difference, especially when you consider that the preferred method of learning of our high school students was online. So we must overcome the digital divide to create those equitable opportunities for our students. When we look at our middle school data, we see that the engagement of middle schools was pretty consistent across those grade levels. But we also realize that we, by not taking attendance or maintaining a consistent bell schedule, so to speak, impacted the urgency of regular participation of students. But on the flip side, we heard from families that they appreciated that flexibility because this was a transitional time for them as well. And so it was important for us to have some flexibility there in order to help support our families during this challenging time, to help them be able to manage providing remote learning experiences for their students at home. So one of our takeaways definitely is looking at how to balance that accountability with being able to support the changes for our students and families. When we look at elementary, we see that our elementary level engagement was pretty high across the board. As this chart illustrates, we did have some outliers at various grade levels, but overall we were pretty strong. 2, it was especially pleasant to be able to see that our early grades, where we know that the foundational skills for literacy are built, that we had a high engagement in those early grades and saw some of our greatest numbers in connection points. Also, we learned that we had 16 elementary schools that were able to have 100% engagement with students in at least one grade level. We also saw many other schools that were very close to that, which henceforth led to the pretty high numbers overall for elementary engagement. One of our other big ways that we were able to make connections and engage and reach our families was through our packets. We found that those packets were extremely, more than what we had predicted, very popular. And so during week 1, we distributed those packets at each of our lunch sites. Our weekly packets were designed for each grade level. Due to the high demand of those packets during week 1, we then shifted gears a bit and began to mail packets. During week 2, we mailed to every pre-K through 8 student. Then after that, they were mailed to those families who opted in to receive paper packets, with the final mailing sent to over 24,000 homes during week 8. But overall, when we look at how many packets we distributed from week 1 through week 8, we distributed over 140,000 packets, in addition to the specialized packets for targeted student populations and high school students for specific course needs. Other ways that we were able to communicate and engage our families was through our Parent Link system. We had over 16 different Parent Link messages that were sent to our families, 16 different Parent Link messages sent to our staff, Messages were sent in English and Spanish regularly to more than 56,000 parent contacts. We also communicated by email, by phone, and through text messages. Another way to engage and reach our families was through our WPS Learn website. We had over 188,000 views, plus more than 3,000 views of our locally created WPS Learn Together teacher video series, which became pretty popular as well. During our continuous learning journey, we provided a helpline where our families could contact us daily by phone, or they could email us through to our hotline email address, and those emails were responded to daily. There was also a social emotional hotline that our families could call. There we provided them with information on community resources. We provided them tips and strategies to be able to support the emotional and social needs of their kiddos. As well, our WPS TV had thousands of original content views. There were live news conferences on television and on our WPS TV online, and our new practice of board meetings broadcast live as well online. Social media was highly active in engaging our families and community during this COVID shutdown. And so as you can see, there was not just a limited, but we were working very hard to find ongoing ways to engage families and students. So I would also be remiss if I didn't mention one of our key outreach strategies to reach our students, to nourish them so that we can educate them. As we started lunch service on March 25th, as you know, we made changes over time to respond to our community and their needs. By the time we concluded lunch service during the last week of school, we served more than 483,000 breakfasts and lunches to children in our community. It's a lot of meals. In addition, WPS teamed with the Kansas Food Bank and numerous community partners to deliver backpacks for kids throughout this spring. By the conclusion of the year, over 10,000 meals had been delivered. And so I want to shout out and give many thanks to the nutrition services heroes, our administrators and staff who showed up every day, even in the rain, to serve and support our students. And so then our professional learning. I can't describe enough how it was accelerated, and boy, was it awesome. The type of professional learning activities and the number of staff participating in trainings in the 2020 fourth quarter increased tremendously in comparison to the 2019 fourth quarter. In addition to providing some of the curriculum type of trainings that we usually provide, we also implemented at an accelerated pace trainings related to technology platforms and remote learning strategies. We had live learning sessions, on-demand learning sessions, over 52 videos, over almost 21,000 viewings. Over 60,000 hours of professional learning was delivered in completely new formats to our staff, as well as professional learning opportunities or trainings for our families. We would not have been able to do this without Mr. Rob back there and his staff, as well as Dr. Geeson and her staff, because they were able to help pivot us so quickly in such a huge manner, not only to support, again, our staff, but our students and our parents as we transition virtually to an online learning environment, basically overnight for our constituents. So, we also know that it's important to receive feedback from our families. And so because of that, a survey has been administered to our parents. We have over 3,300 respondents representing about 6,300 of our students. There's a margin of error of about 2% with a 95% confidence interval level. We gave parents the option to provide feedback online and on paper through distribution at lunch locations, and we requested feedback in both English and Spanish. The majority of our responses were submitted online, and we wish we could have had more effective ways to collect feedback from families who do not already have technology, internet access available. This survey invited feedback on both this year's continuous learning plan, as well as giving us their thoughts for next fall. Today, we are focusing on their reflective comments on today, and we'll share feedback on next year's at a future meeting. And so we'll continue to go through this data, and we'll be able to provide you additional feedback updates related to it and how it will drive our planning for the 2021 school year. So this question was, how would you assess your child's level of engagement in learning this spring? This question was, as a parent, guardian, how would you rate your experience with continuous learning this spring? So we asked our parents, how could we best help in the future should we need to return to continuous learning at home in response to COVID-19? What we found from our parents is consistency is a key. 45% of respondents said they want a consistent schedule of assigned classes, much like we have a master schedule when our students are physically in our buildings. Most significant is the desire for a device and internet connectivity at home. This was at 18%. With the low number of responses we received via paper survey, we believe that while our confidence level in results is high, our results don't represent the voices of those families who need devices and connection to work effectively. So this is why our next conversation is so important. Equal number of responses came from those who wanted student work graded and from those who had a variety of other ideas. So we haven't yet come through all of those responses, but we will be doing so throughout this summer, and we'll be prepared to provide you updates at a later time. Again, as a reminder, we will use this parent survey data as well as our continuous learning data, as well as feedback that we have from task forces that are working to be able to share with you recommendations on how to re-engage and re-enter school in the fall. And so before I close, just a couple of other takeaways as we look at all of our information. Digital equity and accessibility is key. That we know that we have to continue to provide targeted professional learning to be able to support our staff in whatever our continuous learning phase 3 looks like in the fall. That we've heard from students and staff and our families how important it is to have some flexible options, and that communication is key that we can't over-communicate, so it's important that we communicate as often as we can in many types of forms. And so with these takeaways and what we have been able to pull from the data that we have, I'm really excited about the presentation that you're going to hear from Rob and from Susan that will help us also think about the future of Wichita Public Schools, keeping these takeaways in mind and being able to really, truly, as I think about our mission and vision, make us that district of choice in our region, the top district of choice because of the options that we're able to provide for our students. And so with that said, I welcome your questions.
Ron?
Yeah, Dr. Irving, I just want to find out what was the feedback from parents, I guess initially. Was there like a spike in complaints, and then as things went along, it just kind of leveled out and they kind of started to work together? Is that how it kind of went, so to speak?
I will say during the first week or two of our continuous learning journey that our hotline number in email was flooded.
Yeah.
So much of it was just really not knowing how to best support or what type of things might needed to best support students while they were starting this journey. Our families were also then balancing, many of them were working from home and they're not teachers.
Right.
And so as we were able to have the hotline to reassure our families and our students and even our staff that it's okay, we're not perfect at this, we're all learning how to do this together and provide just that sense of we're working through this together, that it allowed everyone to know that it was okay if mistakes were made and that there was going to be supports along the way. After week 2, our calls and our emails on the hotline decreased tremendously. And part of that also is because by then, it was our teachers that were making that direct contact with our students. And some of that, yes, was because of academic, but also it was just checking in and the well-being and the stories that our teachers then were able to share on how they were connecting with not only students, but families. Many of our families just needed a listening ear as well. And so, again, the first couple of weeks was challenging for all of us, parents and staff, our teachers and our administrators, because this was just a brand new learning experience for us all. But as time went on, everyone, for the most part, began to make those adjustments to make this their new normal.
Well, it also sounds like the communication, what you were saying, that I think everybody started to communicate and really kind of get the hang of what was going on.
Yes.
And Ron, I want to say too also, shout out to our families in our community, because that's how we were able to adjust what we were doing. While we thought this is the way we thought we should be moving, and some of that worked out great, but then we heard from parents many different things, and because of that, we responded to the parents, and we adjusted some of the things that we were doing to be able to accommodate the families as well. So I want to give a shout out to the families, because honestly, they were the ones kind of driving some of the adjustments that were being made from the field.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Irving.
Ben?
I think this presentation kind of shows, it reminds us, I mean, we're all stakeholders here, but it reminds us that a successful public education system is like the bedrock of a functioning society. And because we all had to switch our mindsets in March and go to a new cadence of doing things, I think it's reminding a lot of people for whom public education may not have been such a big priority in their lives. It reminded them how important it is to have this system that we're all stakeholders in be strong and robust. So another thing that I was going to mention is, so the survey responses from the teachers, it it feels to me like there's going to be kind of a heat map of our city where we're going to have more targeted intervention for various populations that may not have had the contact. Just, you know, looking at here, I've got, you know, East and Northeast and Heights, almost 100% of kiddos were reached in that fourth quarter. But then we've got some other schools that are clearly going to need some additional support, even if we get completely back to in-person schooling in the fall and don't have to go back out into continuous learning. So I guess that's not really a question, but can we?
Yeah, I see you looking at me, just respond, and I'm going to. Well, you are absolutely correct. If you look, there were some language barriers that I would make an assumption as we dig deeper into our data that we would need to make sure that if we go into this space again, that there's opportunities for us to be able to communicate differently for certain groups. We also, as we are going to be discussing here in a little bit, that we need to do some providing of tools so that all kids have access to some digital, where we have the digital divide is what we talk about a lot, because we were able to communicate through some of these vehicles, those folks were able to communicate, but what about the ones who did not have those vehicles to be able to communicate? So again, I bet if we continue to dig deeper, there's going to be pockets of groups of students that we will need to look at how we support differently, and we're prepared to be able to bring those things back and continue. And today is the first day to begin to bring some of that back.
Awesome, thank you.
Stan?
Stan Reeser, District 4. This is actually, as tragic as all this has been, this is actually a very fascinating experiment that we were forced to conduct in a month and a half. So yeah. Let me try to recap what I think what the data is saying to us. Number one, we lost a month and a half of 9 months of schooling. We already know that traditionally, the students that perhaps we were not able to contact or make a significant contact with, they probably are the same group that loses a lot during the summer, during the 3 months we're off during this summer break. Would that be correct to say?
Summer slide is real.
Summer slide, thank you.
Is real, and the fact that we had a disruption in schooling right prior to summer cannot help that. And so what we have already started is drilling down to not only school but individual student level to begin to think about what supports, what interventions, what resources we are going to need in place in the fall, regardless of what reentry looks like. And not only academia needs, but also social emotional needs. When you look at previous studies of when school disruption has occurred, one of the most important things that each of them speak of is being able to support students with this traumatic event, that, you know, they were at school one day and then were separated from their peers, their teachers, and other staff that they had built connections with. And so, yes, summer slide plus a whole quarter of a disruption of learning is something that we will need to really be prepared to be able to re-engage students. And so I think I might have answered her.
Well, I kind of to go along with what Ben was saying is schools are a reflection of our society. And we talk a lot about stakeholders in our district, but we also have to recognize that anywhere from, depending on the heat map, anywhere from 13% up to 50% in various locations. Some areas are obviously 100%, but they're not stakeholders. they are basically on the outside, and some of it is social economic issues that are affecting it. Some of it is equipment and digital access. But we have to recognize as a school district and as a school board that this actually just fleshes out the numbers of an existing problem that was already there.
Yes.
And the sooner we recognize that we have a significant amount of people in our school district who are not engaged 100% or even 80%, the sooner we can start addressing those issues. That's not to take a half-empty approach. I don't think we should take that approach, obviously. But I think we do have to recognize the reality of what this school district has to face every day. And then I just wanted to just real quickly ask you again at the high school level and the middle school level, how many people preferred digital and then how many preferred they wanted a packet?
So at our high school, nearly 90% preferred online learning.
Okay. And then middle school and elementary, did they go down?
They did. They did with elementary and middle. It was reported about 1/3 of that group wanted or preferred to receive their learning through the paper packets. Part of that also goes to when you think about high school and the number of courses that those students were engaged in, and we weren't set up or prepared to be able to provide paper packets for every exploratory course or CTE course that is available at the high school. And so those students really preferred to be able to continue to interact with their teachers. I believe, as we dig deeper into this data, however, that as we look at what other type of course availability could we have provided for our elementary and middle school students if they were able to interact with it online, I believe these numbers would be higher as well.
And we're not assuming that just because you wanted a paper packet that no learning went on, or that digital learning was better, or vice versa. We're assuming that they're equal, correct?
Correct, because whether it was paper packet or whether it was online, there was still the interactive communication with a teacher.
Well, I would just conclude, I mean, just from my observation and looking at these numbers, and they're fascinating, is what I think these numbers show is the problem was not created 100% by COVID-19. This fleshes out problems that were already out there.
Yes.
And it just now it's just another way of looking at it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Our classrooms, our hallways are a reflection of our community.
Yeah.
And so, yes.
Thank you.
Just to follow up a little bit, I think what Stan just said is very true. We've known we had this problem, but now we have some data that shows kind of what we're dealing with. But knowing that, and knowing that so many, particularly of our high school students, prefer the online learning, how have you seen us change as a district to be able to reach out and meet those needs? And as we move forward, and I know this report's coming later, but as we move forward, we're changing the way we think about school.
Most definitely. One of the things that I've shared with others is due to a crisis, we didn't have a choice but to begin to think differently about delivery of instruction, and also actually allowed us to really begin to explore innovative ways of being able to teach and meet the learning styles and needs of our students. And so I believe that's one of the most positive things that has come from this. So what we have to do, have been doing, will continue to do, is looking at what supports do our teachers and other instructional staff and leaders need to be able to make sure this new innovative way of thinking doesn't end if we return back to the building in the fall. We learned from this experience that traditional way of how we've delivered instruction has a place, but it cannot, should not be all how we reach the needs of our students. And so with that professional learning, I go back to the accelerated professional learning plans that have been put in place. It's not just about giving folks curriculum. It's about, what other ways could we deliver instruction, and what does that look like, and what coaching might our teachers need through that, and being able then not only help our teachers, but our students, professional learning for our students as well. They're going to need trainings and support on how to receive information delivery, receive information differently, but also be able to communicate to their teachers the mastery of those skills that they're learning, and not just in a traditional, always an assessment or paper product. And so, again, crisis has forced us to be innovative, and I'm just really excited about some of the things that we're planning for the future.
My second question is around, we know we have a parent survey that we're gaining all kinds of information from. Did we do a survey with our staff to begin to determine which ones might be good teachers to do online work and which ones would prefer to do it another way or whatever?
So a little bit of both. We have the parent survey. There has been a survey that has been given to samples of teachers. We've also pulled in teachers to work on a task force that has provided additional feedback. And then as we receive more guidance from the state related to phase 3 of continuous learning, and we wrap that around some of the plans that we're starting, our goal is then to use that to get feedback from our teachers on what that might look like for this fall. So there's still more feedback that we're planning to receive from our teaching staff.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, a couple questions. One to follow up on what you're talking about with Stan's question, and that's fantastic stuff. And I'm really proud of what we've done with that, because we did take a crisis and move into a new teaching arena. The one question that I have is, because it was a crisis, not only did our students move into the arena, our parents moved into the arena. We were locked home. Mm-hmm. If we look at going back to school next year as an optional online versus in person, I'm afraid that we might lose some kids because the parents aren't at home making mm-hmm. the children learn. Mm-hmm. And you won't have that, you'll still have some of it, but I mean, is that a consideration that we need to be concerned about with when we open our doors again, or?
Well, I will say that we heard feedback from our parents related to that type of question. We've heard from our staff related to that specific type of question. And so as we continue to plan, I call it plan A, plan B, plan C, it will be important that when we share that with you, that we be able to say how we have used that feedback that we've heard to plan for something like just that, because that was something specifically that we've asked parents, we've asked that specifically of our staff. What are some of the things that we learned from this experience that's gone well? But what are some things that if we needed to go into either a remote or some type of blended approach in the future that we need to do differently, and so that we can plan differently and better to enhance it in the future?
And I know we have a presentation from Rob next, and he may be answering this question. If he is, then tell me not to ask it.
I'll say, hold that thought.
Hold that thought, and then that would be perfectly fine. My question is I was listening to a study, and I shouldn't watch TV, but I was watching TV. And so I don't know if it's true or not, but they were talking about the haves and the have-nots with technology, and that's something that we're running into. the gap widens. And I've asked the question a couple times because I barely run this computer, and I understand that. But I was asking, you know, how do we get kids with technology that can't have technology, their parents can't afford it, or they physically don't have a way to have the technology? How are we going to do that and get those, you know, we're showing up about a 17%.
So,
are you waving your arms at me?
So
Rob?
I'm going to say, hold that thought, because we have something for you.
And that's fine. I wondered if that wouldn't be covered because
It's coming.
you know, I asked the question, somebody told me that they can have internet in a computer without Wi-Fi. And I'm totally amazed that that can happen, so I can barely get Wi-Fi at the house and make my computer work, so I'll hold that thought.
Hold that thought.
Stan?
Stan Reeser District. I was going to say, before I
Just a minute, Julie.
make my final question, I was going to ask if Ernestine and Julie had a question first before I speak second again.
Okay. Julie, did you?
Yes, I do. Ernestine, do you have questions also? Okay, well, this is Julie, Hedrick, District 2. I'll go ahead with, I just have a couple of questions also. It sounded like both Ben and Stan were referring to specifics on the engagement data. And since I'm not physically present there, was the board provided with details of that information, of that engagement data?
Yes, we have a PowerPoint in front of us that was presented. That should have been sent to you today. Mike, was that sent?
Okay.
He said yes, it was.
Okay, so
It should be in your email
that
box.
I see before I joined the meeting. Second of all, so like on the packets that were provided for the students, so like a third grade student, you know, just the typical third grade packets, all students were sent the same third grade packet, I assume. Is that correct?
All students were sent the same packet for their grade level. However, there were some exceptions for some targeted student groups where the packets were differentiated based upon their individual needs.
Okay, so for example, like a gifted student, there was an attempt to like do something individual and target students.
So for students that may have had some particular exceptionality, there were some differentiated packets, as well as language if students needed a packet in Spanish or another language. Those were differentiated as well.
Wow, that's very challenging if you had to specialize packets. I would think that would have been quite difficult. Do you feel like that was successful, or any changes that'll need to be done next time? How did that go as far as having to do individualized packets for students?
Well, I will say we have lots of rock stars from our teachers that were helping with this to some of our coaches and technology team and our operations team. It was truly united teamwork. Because the packets were needed to be created and turned around to be distributed on a weekly basis, it did mean that folks were working extremely hard, but we, again, have some amazing rock stars that were able to do it. We did learn some things from this experience, including that the packets that were created predominantly for language arts and mathematics. And so even though we had other resources available for families and students related to extracurricular type of or exploratory and specials content, we would want to be able to expand our packets if we did something like this similar in the future beyond just ELA, English Language Arts, and mathematics. The differentiated pieces, again, was it challenging at times? Yes, but was our team able to move those barriers to be able to provide what was needed for our students, yes.
Okay. And then my last question, as far as the survey, the family, it sounded like from the conversation that we'll get that specific data at a later date, correct?
Yes, we'll be sharing that parent survey data, especially those questions that are pertinent for us to plan for fall, the re-entry. We'll be sharing that with you as well as the other data that we are using for that planning process.
Okay. And lastly, I just need to inform the board and the public that I'm going to have to now leave the board meeting. I had a previously scheduled appointment that I scheduled a long time ago when we were supposed to be meeting at 6 tonight, and so I'm going to have to be leaving the meeting.
Thank you very much for letting us know that, Julie. Okay, Stan?
Dr. Irving, one last little comment. I bet if we overlay this engagement data with our test scores in individual schools, and especially in reading and math and the real basics, I bet there would be a very good correlation between those two data. Am I on the right track here?
I will tell you that when we make instructional decisions, we're not looking at just one data point. And so you're right on the direction where we are going, and is looking at the data that we have available from this continuous learning plan, as well as layering it with what chronic absenteeism data has looked like. Is it some of the same students, and layering that as well as with other academia data that we have available.
And Stan Reeser, District 4, and the reason why I say that is because as we go into Rob's presentation, I don't want us to think that technology alone is going to solve this problem. It is really going to come down to zeroing in on where the problems are and where we need to improve or do our best. We can never correct it 100% ourselves, but we really have to zero in. And I know administration is already thinking that direction, and so I appreciate that. But I don't want us to just 100% rely on thinking, well, now we have people with more handhelds and more devices and more internet access, that somehow that's going to solve our problem, because it's still going to come down to individual families and their engagement.
Takes a true partnership.
Yes. I'm seeing no other questions. Ernestine, did you have any questions?
This is Ernestine, and I have a question when you have a gap there.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Okay, Ernestine Crable of District 3 Remote. Were the parents the ones that were supposed to be grading the packets, and how did that work? I really understand about the difficulty with online technology. One of the things that's happened to me right now during this board meeting is dealing with getting the remote, the mute to work or not work. But
thank you for being persistent.
Like I was not here, but I was here. But anyway, I just wondered that, and the same thing with the online. Was when the student, was it an automatic machine graded, like the kind of quizzes that can be done where the computer immediately tells the students whether they're correct or not? How was the grading done so that the student knew whether they had accomplished their goal or not?
Great question. So we made the decision that we were freezing our grades at the end of third quarter so that our families and students, as they were transitioning to this remote learning experience, did not also have to be concerned that while we're trying to figure out how to make this a new normal, that added the stress of grades. And so that was a decision that was made for our district. However, that doesn't mean that feedback and guidance was not occurring with the work that our students were completing. And so I'll speak to the online curriculum pieces. There were two different types. One is personalized learning, individualized learning, and so as students master certain skills, it moves the students on. As students need more help and support, it continues to provide similar type of activities and exercises. And so students know immediately what they have done well and what they didn't get right. That data was also available daily for our teachers, so then when our teachers were connecting with the students either through phone, email, some other type of technology platform, they were able to speak to the students about that work that students were completing online. The other type also of online learning was with our teachers giving students exercises and activities, and they were able to, again, provide feedback and direction and guidance related to that. The paper packets, even though they were not receiving a grade that translated to a grade on the student's progress report, teachers were able to, when they were meeting with students, or even if students didn't have access to the computer, to email some things. They were asking students to take pictures of it and share on telephone or however, or cell phone, I guess. Is there a difference between a cell phone and a telephone? And so even though grades were not being assigned for the progress report, teachers still were reviewing the packets with their students and providing them feedback so that they knew how to continue to do well related to those specific skills.
I wasn't really worrying about grades, excuse me for using that word, because I wasn't worrying about grades, but when a student completed something, there was a way to know how many math problems did I do correctly. With a math book, you can sometimes find the answers at the back of the book, but with a packet, I just wondered how that was done.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so that's why it was important that when we asked our teachers to identify students who they had not had interactive communication with during this period versus those that maybe they had just sent an email to or sent phone messages to, and we had not heard back from those students, because continuous learning during how we wanted to know we were engaging students was through some type of interactive reciprocal communication between the student and the teacher.
Okay, I'm seeing no more questions.
Can I make a comment before
Absolutely.
Dr. Irvin leaves? First of all, I just want to, if the teachers, any teachers are listening to this report, or if they listen later, I just want to, on behalf of everyone in this room, to commend the teachers of the Wichita Public Schools for their efforts. I'm talking about paraprofessionals as well, all of our in-building principals. Just thank you for the efforts that were put forth during this last 2 months. All of the learning, all of the extra that you did to be able to reach families. Thank you, because this was a very difficult task, and you all have risen to the occasion time and time again, as you always do. And I just want to, on behalf of everyone, to just say thank you to our teachers for your efforts to try to keep kids engaged and do the best, even amongst with your own things that you were trying to do at home with your kids and everything else that came along with that. I just want to publicly say thank you for your efforts, and we do appreciate you.
I would very much like to second that.
This is Ernestine, and I just want to thank the administrative staff who tried to pull all of this together while trying to breathe, and I'm sure you were doing dance steps backwards in high heels too. But this whole thing was so amazing that was pulled off. I am thrilled that we also have learned something from it as to how we can go forward better. But as I said once before, it took 150 years to create the schools that we have and the education we've had, and you all are within a matter of weeks recreated. The teachers were wonderful to jump in and just they had never been told this, and I suspect that many of them were not particularly tech savvy or as tech savvy as they needed to be, and they learned in a hurry. I am so amazed and impressed. I think this district really can pat itself on the back.
Thank you, Ernestine. I too want to thank the teachers and the administrative staff. You know, standing on the sidelines watching as this has happened, it's been amazing. And was it perfect? The answer is no, but we did a very, very good job in this district of trying to